My name is Allison Grinter Allen. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I like Progress Texas because it is very difficult to get straightforward information about Texas politics, specifically the statewide things that we need to know about. And Progress Texas does not only that, but it gets straight to the point, in and out, real quick with the things that I need to know. And I feel, especially after this incredibly rancid legislature, that I have been briefed up on what hits and what failed and where the potholes are going to be in the coming couple of years.
It's Wednesday, June 24th, 2026, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. Progress Texas amplifies progressive values, leaders, and actions through our no-paywall podcasts and digital media. We reach millions of Texans monthly, and that's made possible by folks like you who invest in independent progressive media by Texans for Texans. Huge thanks to Jamie Wood, Jacqueline Thomas, and Joseph Gorman for their ongoing sustaining support. Very much appreciated. As the Texas Democratic Convention gets ramping up in Corpus, new polling reminds Texas Democrats that while nothing is guaranteed and that the fight ahead is going to be a tough one, there's every reason to believe. Right now, Eleanor Dearman at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram writes on a new University of Texas Politics Project poll revealing a statistical tie in the high-stakes Texas U.S. Senate race, with Republican Ken Paxton drawing 43% and Democratic State Representative James Tallarico securing 42%, a razor-thin margin, a virtual tie, underscoring substantial general election vulnerability for Ken Paxton following his highly divisive primary runoff victory over incumbent Senator John Cornyn. Both candidates showing strong party base consolidation. Tallarico's is a bit stronger, with 88% of Democrats all in for JT compared to 84% of Republicans who are ready to ignore a lot of scandal and corruption and vote for Paxton. Perhaps the big story here is Tallarico destroying Paxton with independent voters with a commanding 40% to 12% advantage. The news isn't as rosy. Among the other statewide contests where entrenched Republican incumbents, including Governor Greg Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, enjoy more typically comfortable leads over their respective Democratic challengers. Gina Hinojosa and Vicki Goodwin both trail their respective opponents by 7 points. Democratic State Comptroller nominee Sarah Eckhart trails Republican Don Huffines by 6 points. Democratic Attorney General nominee Nathan Johnson trails GOP hopeful Mays Middleton by 5. Independents lean Democrat in those races too, however, so those gaps are bridgeable. In particular, Greg Abbott's disapproval marks are sky high in this poll. How to take advantage of James Tallarico's top-of-ticket leverage and maximize independent turnout will be central topics in Corpus Christi this week. The poll also finds deep resistance to data centers on both sides of the aisle, even as the Greg Abbott-appointed ERCOT streamlines the process for the biggest tech projects to plug into our already feeble power grid. Economically, a 33% majority feel the economy is a lot worse off than it was this time last year. The link to the full June UT Texas Politics Project poll is in the Star-Telegram link you'll find in our show notes this morning. Add to any optimism progressive folks in Texas might be enjoying right now another sober dose of reality coming from the results of that trial of activists charged in Fort Worth under the Trump regime's new terrorism code as members of Antifa, a designation that remains ill-defined even as a crackdown upon it results in draconian, unprecedented prison sentences for a group of Texas activists and signifies a sharp weaponization of the justice system by the Trump administration. Sam Levine at The Guardian says that following the trial over a 4th of July 2025 demonstration at an immigration detention facility in Alvarado, 9 loosely affiliated progressive demonstrators have received sentences ranging from 30 to 100 years in prison. These extreme sentences, achieved by consecutively stacking charges, far exceed the typical 15 to 25-year range for similar offenses. Among these defendants were demonstrators who didn't participate in the planning of the protest, arrived separately, and don't know each other outside of the incident in question. Even they received staggering decades-long sentences. It's notable that these jail terms vastly outstrip the longest sentences handed down in relation to the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio, for example, received just 22 years for seditious conspiracy and, of course, given Trump's wholesale pardon of the people who attacked the Capitol that day. The point is moot. This case and its result represent the successful criminalization of non-MAGA political expression itself and the advancement of a fictional narrative of domestic Antifa terrorism. Prosecutors secured sweeping convictions for providing material support to terrorists, in this case by wantonly undermining basic civil liberties and characterizing legally owned firearms, standard activist security practices like using Signal, and the possession of leftist political literature as central evidence of an Antifa criminal conspiracy. The outcome of this case signals a coordinated and accelerating nationwide judicial strategy to intimidate political dissent. Similar conspiracy prosecutions are also underway against immigration activists in Minneapolis and Spokane, Washington. Referring to Stephen Monticelli's writing in the Texas Observer a few weeks ago upon the guilty verdict in the Prairieland case, folks on the progressive side need to heed what's happening. This is a major victory for Donald Trump and MAGA, who now have precedent to target routine left-wing civil disobedience under the guise of combating domestic terrorism. By successfully deploying material support for terrorism charges against progressive activists for the first time and coming away with massive prison sentences, the Trump DOJ has successfully weaponized common protest behaviors, reading or owning political literature, using encrypted messaging apps, even wearing black clothing to a protest event, into indicators of a militant conspiracy that will hold up in court. The Trump machine now has a green light to aggressively target a broad range of left-wing activity, and prosecutors now have an established legal pathway to bypass traditional guardrails and brand future anti-MAGA protesters or civil rights groups as domestic terrorist threats. To education, and we've talked about the redo that's required on the Bible story-infused Bluebonnet learning coming to your kid's classroom. Isaac Yu at the Houston Chronicle says that massive state-sponsored printing error now has a price tag. It's going to cost Texas taxpayers up to $8.4 million to fix over 4,200 errors in the controversial Bluebonnet curriculum. The Texas Education Agency has entered into an emergency contract to print and ship nearly 1 million pieces of replacement material before the school year kicks off in August, while allocating $3.6 million just to destroy existing books due to widespread copyright and licensing violations. Who knew you had to pay for that stuff, right? This costly blunder right out of the gate highlights the lacking language of a 2023 law that transformed the TEA into a top-down textbook publisher. Public school districts are financially incentivized to adopt this heavily criticized curriculum, which leans hard into biblical teachings as part of a broader conservative effort to inject Christianity into public education in Texas. As they say in Austin, what starts here changes the world, and not necessarily in a good way. Sarah Schwartz at Education Week writes on, quote, "Why Texas's fight over social studies standards has national consequences," unquote. As we've talked about, the Texas State Board of Education is poised to adopt a sweeping, highly controversial overhaul of its social studies standards, a move critics argue will institutionalize a Christian nationalist agenda across our state's public schools. Set for the 2030-31 school year, the modifications to Texas social studies also aggressively inject biblical references into elementary history, requiring third graders to link the Ten Commandments to American law and sixth graders to compare Harriet Tubman to Moses. This extreme focus on Judeo-Christian scripture distorts the historical record by elevating biblical influence while completely erasing the foundational impacts of Roman law and English common law. The guidelines have provoked intense public outrage not only for systematically marginalizing minority history, but also for sanitizing past atrocities. Women's history is largely omitted, and Islam is framed almost exclusively through a lens of conflict and terrorism. There are several conflicts of interest on the front end as well. Schwartz says that one of the new curriculum's content advisors happens to be the recipient of a grant from the ultra-conservative Texas Public Policy Foundation. Beyond ideological bias, the plan upends the structural framework of Texas education by forcing complex topics like the U.S. Constitution, which educators warn will leave younger students with a dangerously shallow and thus later easily manipulated understanding of history. Add to all of this Texas's immense market power as the nation's second largest student population. There's good reason to worry that this gutting of social studies standards in Texas will be contagious, serving as a dangerous blueprint for conservative lawmakers nationwide to export a Christian-centric historical narrative across the United States. As we head for Corpus Christi, y'all, the wrongs to be righted are piling to the sky. The hard work ahead starts with progressive wins in November. We're excited to see everybody this week in Corpus Christi for the Texas Democratic Party Convention. Tomorrow, Thursday, June 25th, we're going to be teaming up with the Texas Progressive Caucus for a warm-up happy hour from 6 to 8 at the Goldfish on North Mesquite, and we'll be set up to hang out with you in the main expo area throughout the convention at the Hilliard Center. Progress Texas is proud to be the official media partner of the 2026 Texas Democratic Convention, and we can't wait to see y'all in Corpus. Houston listeners, the next episode of our In Progress Roundtable show will come to you on the radio in the middle of a new Thursday afternoon block of progressive political programming tomorrow. In Progress starts at 6:30 p.m. every Thursday on KPFT 90.1 FM after the Progressive Forum and before the midterm show with Ernest Wittring, and it runs a second time every Sunday morning at 11 on KPFT FM HD2. With your support, we hope to expand our radio footprint beyond Houston this year. Click the link in the show notes to make your tax-deductible donation to help us reach new audiences via Texas Radio. While you're at the website, hit the web store. It's ready for you to grab the merch to match your progressive values, including our newly released Humans Against Abbott, Y'all Means All for Pride Month, and Resist stickers, shirts, and buttons. Hit the web store at ProgressTexas.org to support your favorite podcast network today. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Wednesday, June 24, 2026. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. When lies in Texas are well funded by the far right, your support for fact-based reporting is needed and appreciated. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day. We'll see you again right here tomorrow morning.